My name is Bobby. My journey is already ending, but ending on a cliffhanger, where questions will be left unanswered and mysteries will be left unsolved.
I built this room during the war to hide weapons and ammunition. Little did I imagine.
Son, I only pray that someday, in a better world, we'll meet again.
What up, Home Slice? We are back with the series that's always the bomb, Dark Shadows. But this time with the 1991 revival series. For this video, I'll be focusing on the 1790 storyline, which are episodes 7 through 12 and are the final episodes of the series. This show was canceled unexpectedly, and the last episode actually ends on a cliffhanger. So let's take a look at one of TV's missed opportunities. A show that original fans had so hoped would succeed, and that NBC regretted canceling. The final episodes of the 1991 Dark Shadows revival. The original creator-producer Dan Curtis had filmed the pilot, and the series was set to debut in the fall of 1990, but it wasn't on the schedule. And Brandon Tartikoff of NBC called Dan to apologize. Now Dan, who could talk you into anything, kept calling him kid, told him that there had been an understanding from the beginning that the series would go on the air, and he ended it with saying he knew they'd do business again in the future. A couple days later, Tartikoff called back and agreed to put Dark Shadows on as a mid-season replacement and air 5 episodes. But that wasn't good enough. The show was too expensive, so Dan needed a commitment of at least 13 hours, and he told him that. Tartikoff said no. A couple days later, Tartikoff called back and said yes, and the series went into production.
However, Dan's already demanding nature seemed to be in hyperdrive. The writer Matt Hall stated that early on, there was a moment where Dan seemed open to new ideas, but then just clamped down, and the answer to everything was the original series. A lot of the preparation was Matt and his father Sam, the original show's writer, going through old scripts and episode summaries, looking for whatever they could use, while Dan kept watching and rewatching House of Dark Shadows in the office next door. During filming, Dan scolded Barbara Steele about the framing of a syringe, and she told him in front of everyone that she quit, and the whole crew applauded. But then she came back the next day. However, Sam Hall was the one who really had enough. Dan would place one writer in one room and another writer in another room and have them both work on the same script without telling them that. And Sam told Dan that he wouldn't work with them anymore and that he wasn't letting his writers have any dignity. And Dan himself already felt that old rut of, I have to keep this show up again.
To promote the series, they held a nationwide radio contest called Don't Be Afraid of the Dark, where winners won videotapes of the original series, miniature coffins, and the grand prize winners were flown to Los Angeles for advanced screening of the pilot. The series began like a miniseries, where the 2-hour pilot aired on a Sunday night, and episodes 2 and 3 aired on that Monday night. And it was a smash! But the day before it was supposed to start airing in its regular time slot of Friday night, the Gulf War began, and it kept getting preempted. NBC tried to make up for it by airing it at a different time, but if the TV guide had already been printed, you would have no way of knowing what time it was going to be on, and people couldn't keep up with it. So on the series, Victoria Winters was getting lost in time, and Dark Shadows was getting lost in television land.
There has been a seance at Collinwood, and Victoria Winters, the governess in 1990, trades places with Phyllis Wick, the new governess at Collinwood in 1790. Victoria can hardly believe what has happened. Clearly confused, Abigail believes her to be a witch and takes her suspicions to the witch hunter Reverend Trask. Barnabas is engaged to be married to Josette Dupré, who looks identical to Victoria Winters. But Josette's servant Angelique, whom had an affair with Barnabas in Martinique, casts a spell to make Josette fall in love with Barnabas's brother, Jeremiah. They marry, and Barnabas kills Jeremiah in a duel. Barnabas figures out which witch is really which and kills Angelique, but not before Angelique curses him to become a vampire. Barnabas's best friend, Peter Bradford, acts as Victoria Winter's lawyer, but because of interference from Angelique, they lose, and Victoria Winters is set to hang. Victoria realizes that she is the reincarnation of Josette Dupré, and that this Barnabas is the vampire from 1990. When she is hung, she switches places again with Phyllis Wick and returns to 1990. She looks at Barnabas and knows full well what he is, and Barnabas realizes it.
From the beginning, this series has had the production values, so you really feel like you're back in time with the period sets and costumes. But this is where they also really get the storytelling down. And their 1790 story is a spectacular recreation of the original 1795.
One of the things that the show has struggled with is achieving the feel of the original. And to be fair, that might be impossible, because as David Selby points out, the original was this world all unto itself. It was literally inspired by a dream that Dan Curtis had one night. But this story gets close. It begins outside of the old house. It's all foggy, but with bright colored flowers, and it looks like a dream. And Joanna Going, who plays Victoria Winters, looks like Snow White to me. She references Alice in Wonderland. She sings over the rainbow. And with all the period costumes and dialogue, it feels like a dark fairy tale. And that is Dark Shadows.
On the original, this was the strongest story they had, so they're working with their best material. Now they have to condense 94 half-hour episodes into 6 hours. But they do a great job of simplifying that plot. And they even connect the two main stories of Victoria's witch trial and the Barnabas, Josette, and Angelique love triangle by having Victoria Winters be the reincarnation of Josette. So both stories flow together. And while they naturally have to cut a lot of things out, they keep all of the big scenes that fans remember and we're looking forward to see again. Like Josette jumping off Overdose Hill. Angelique bringing Jeremiah back as a zombie. And Barnabas killing his Aunt Abigail. I'm going to squash you like a bug. Aunt Abigail. A demon! A demon! Get away from me!
Don't run away from me!
Why do you never listen? They change certain details and make it more elaborate, and it does not disappoint. Now, as with all remakes, they make certain changes. But I think all their changes are really interesting, and I like when they do their own thing. Probably my favorite is when Victoria Winters figures out that Barnabas is a vampire.
Oh my god. Vampires are supposed to be immortal, aren't they? There's a man in my time, very much like Barnabas. He said he was his descendant. He said he was named for him.
Episode 12 ends with Victoria Winters coming back to 1990. She looks at Barnabas, and he could tell by her face that she knows. It is so exciting. I could never imagine that happening on the original series, and you can't wait to find out what's going to happen next. Unfortunately, you never do. That's when the series ends. But hey, what a way to go out on top and leave your imagination wondering. While the show's storytelling has improved, the new cast continues to be fly.
Some actors are irreplaceable.
As in the original, when they go back in time, they have the same actors play the new roles. Except, of course, for Ben Cross, who plays Barnabas Collins. Now, if I had to choose between the original and the new, I prefer the way Jonathan Frid plays a vampire. But here, it's Barnabas as a young man before he becomes one. And in that aspect, I actually prefer Ben Cross.
Please don't kill me and bury me in the basement.
Even though both men were 43 when cast, Ben Cross looks and acts younger. He's likable, but also emotionally impulsive, like a young man. And you could see him succumbing to temptation and having an affair with Angelique. In the original, when Barnabas finds out that Josette and Jeremiah are married, he's hurt, and it seems like he challenges Jeremiah to a duel because his pride is hurt, which is appropriate for a Collins. But Ben Cross is more angry, and he storms off after Jeremiah in a fit of rage.
I will find them! Ben Loomis! Ben Loomis! Josette and Jeremiah! Aye, sir. I seen them last night. I didn't know what to do. Where did they go? Master Jeremiah said something about Boston, sir. Give me my saddle. This is between my brother and myself. As they say in the 90s, Barnabas goes postal and almost kills Jeremiah. But when Josette tells him that they're married, he stops. And unlike the original, it's Jeremiah who challenges Barnabas to a duel. But at the duel, Barnabas, who knows he's a better shot, decides not to load his gun. So this duel was more out of anger as opposed to defending your honor. And I find that easier to relate to because everyone gets mad, so I could see how it could escalate to that. Now at the duel, after Barnabas has had a chance to chill out, he decides that this is not worth destroying my family over. And I find that so endearing. When Jonathan Frid became a vampire, I think I was more excited because I love him as a vampire. But with Ben Cross, I felt more sorry for him because he seems like a good guy who's forced to become a monster. And speaking of someone who's never a good guy, let's talk about the evil witch Angelique Bouchard, as played by Lisette Anthony. Spirit of darkness, spirit of pestilence and pain, hear me now. Bring him back to me from the darkness. Do my bidding. Rise up and do my bidding.
Through magic, Angelique puts the bullet in Barnabas' gun that kills Jeremiah. Now on the original, Laura Parker got to develop a more complex character, but Lisette Anthony is bewitching as the pure evil Angelique. And I love the way she puts that sinister edge on her French accent. This Angelique is more powerful. Unlike the original, she knows what's happening in the future and brings Victoria Winters back in time to destroy the Collins family so that Victoria, who is Josette's reincarnation, will have nowhere to go back to, and Barnabas will lose Josette forever. She's sexy and wicked, and I dig how she looks in ghost form. It's like a more elaborate CGI version of the shots of Angelique from Night of Dark Shadows.
Now Barnabas' more agreeable love interest is Joanna Going as the governess Victoria Winters, who's been thrust back into time. As I mentioned, she looks like Snow White to me. She's modern looking, but has those qualities of a classic gothic heroine. She gives a great performance, and the writers give her so much to do. Amongst Dark Shadows fans, it's sort of an inside joke that all Victoria Winters does is say, "I don't understand." But this Victoria Winters does understand. She's smart. She's proactive. She figures out why she's been sent back in time and that Barnabas was a vampire. She's an exciting character to watch.
They also made a great move by having Victoria be the reincarnation of Josette. It simplifies the story, and it lets Joanna have the dual role of both Victoria and Josette Dupre, which is something that Alexander Mulkey never had the chance to do.
I was told we resemble each other, but this is remarkable. Yes.
And finally, there's Roy Thins, who's okay at playing Roger Collins, but goes to town as the witch hunter Reverend Trask. Just like they do with Barnabas and Angelique, they make him scarier. He's creepy and slimy looking. And while the original sincerely wanted to cure the world of witches, this one seems like he just loves being cruel. He's even been to prison.
There are tests to be made. What shall you do? Turn me into a lizard? Change the blood in my veins to writhing maggots?
So there are certain things I like more about the original cast of characters, but certain things I like more about this group. So I'm glad I have both. And just like they do the characters a little differently, they do the time travel a little differently too. And speaking of time travel, guess what I have from the early 90s?
NBC didn't want the series to become a total period piece, so as a compromise, Dan Curtis included scenes of the modern Collinwood. So while it's mainly set in 1790, they do go back and forth a little. This would have been hard for the half-hour show, but for an hour where you have more time per episode, I actually love this change.
The first time I watched the 1795 story on the original series, I missed those regular characters. I wanted to see what was going on with Phyllis Wick and everybody else. So I'm glad that we get a chance to check in with them here, especially since we're only 6 episodes in, so I'm still getting attached to those regular characters. And I have to say, they make the most of these little flash forwards. Because within them, they'll have plot twists. They show Angelique trying to take over so it connects to what's going on in the past. And I'm just as excited to see what's going on in 1990 as I am in 1790.
Because of the trouble with being preempted, a second season was up in the air. Dan Curtis and the writers had story ideas for the start of year 2, and 50,000 fans wrote in letters asking for another season. In fact, May 8th, 1991 was Save Dark Shadows Day, where fans with picket signs held rallies at NBC affiliates in 18 different cities. In fact, the cast even dropped by the Burbank one. Unfortunately, Brandon Tartikoff quit NBC, and his replacement, Warren Littlefield, canceled Dark Shadows to make a fresh start for himself. A few years later, Littlefield contacted Dan Curtis, admitted he made a mistake, and asked Dan if he could bring Dark Shadows back as an occasional 2 to 4 hour special. However, Dan felt that because Dark Shadows was an ensemble, the cast might not always be available, and that it wouldn't work with the serialized nature of the storytelling. So after 12 episodes, it was over, but most fans really enjoy this short-lived series. They've embraced the new actors, and some of them have even appeared in the Dark Shadows audio dramas alongside the original actors. Like Barbara Steele was in the only one that Jonathan Frid did.
It's fascinating to think where this could have gone. The writer Matt Hall seems to think that they would have just continued repeating the stories from the original. And to be honest, I don't need a condensed version of every storyline from the original series. Plus, if Dan was already feeling like he was in a rut, I don't know how much longer he would have cared. And on the original series, you could tell when he starts to lose interest. There's a drop-off in quality. However, this series seems to get better with every episode, especially the last 2. So maybe it took them a little while to figure out what they were doing. Plus, that cliffhanger would have opened it up to all sorts of new ideas and situations. So I'm not definite, but I think it might have been great. And the fact that NBC regretted their decision tells me that they thought it might have been great too. Regardless, I enjoyed these 12 episodes. They had a great look, a great cast, and as they hit 1790, the storytelling really hit its stride. So I give it 3.5 revamped vampires out of 4. Thank you for watching Dusty Old Movies, and peace out.